Good morning. I hope you've had a good half-term break. Welcome back. We're going to be looking today at an example of a local energy scheme that benefits people. We have looked at this one in the past, and we're going to be looking at this area here in the Peruvian mountains in the Andes called Chambamontera. And we're going to be focusing on this key term here, which is a microhydro scheme. So we're going to look at these three key terms in particular, and then what we're going to do is we're going to start to look at what local means. Now, the first thing I'd like you to do is to look at your PowerPoint. You've got a resource PowerPoint which has got 4 sections on it and an exam question at the end. So there's 2 sides really, and it should be enough for today. The first thing I want you to do is either click on the Peru map on the virtual classroom, or click on where it says at the bottom here, this video link where it says starter video. Now what will happen with that is it will take you to a video about 7 minutes long of Chambamontera. If there are any problems with that, then I have actually included a video link separate to that as well. Okay, so have a look at that. Don't need to do anything, just watch the video, don't need to make any notes. I'm going to pause here. Right, so at the top of your sheet there is a section of I spell words, and the first one that I'm going to be interested in here is this word, microhydro power. Okay, so basically a microhydro scheme, microhydro power. Now if you look at the root of these words, this basically means small. And in the instance here, we're talking about the scale of it is very small. Hydro meaning water. And in this instance, what we're looking at here is a river. And power, well, obviously, we're talking about electricity for this one. Okay, so this is basically a small scale scheme to create electricity. And when we say small, what we actually really mean is local, one that's only going to benefit local people and not round the world. Right, the second word that we're going to be looking at, or second term, is this phrase bottom up. All right, effectively it's a type of aid that's provided to people, but rather than just give them everything, throw money at the problem, which isn't a sustainable solution, you're effectively giving them the tools to be able to make improvements to their own lives. But you don't just give it to them, you give them the technique, you give them the machinery, but in this instance what we're doing here is they are actually owning the scheme. Okay, so by owning the scheme, that means that they have paid for it. All right, so everybody that wants to use it has to contribute, and by owning the scheme, they run it, and because they're running it, they are effectively learning new skills, and because they're learning new skills and they're running it, they're also making decisions. Now, what this will mean is that these decisions, I'm going to put all the way up here, what the decisions will be about is what is best for the area. These people know the area the best, and so therefore what they do is they make these decisions which are going to benefit the people the most. They know it best, they know it better than the charities. Practical action in terms of this scheme, well, they run the bottom-up scheme, but in essence what they do is they provide the technology and the expertise. The people provide the money, and they learn how to run, develop, repair, and make decisions about the scheme. So basically bottom up meanings that the locals have ownership and operation of the scheme. Okay, so what we've got here is the idea of sustainable energy. Okay, now the way that I always look at this is if you had it's almost like a Venn diagram. Let's see if it'll actually right this time. So you've got your Venn diagram like that. Okay, in there. And you've got your Venn diagram in here. And in this box here, you've got environmental, you've got social, and you've got economic sustainability. So to achieve sustainability, you would need to be in this middle box here. That is where the most sustainable area is in here. Okay, so anything that's environmental, well, we'll talk about that later, social and economic. It's effectively sustainable energy. Can it be maintained and improve lives? Okay, now even with environmental sustainability, that's going to improve the people's lives. So what we're going to be looking at here is how is this scheme going to be sustainable leading into the future? Okay, now you have got 4 sections with one exam question at the end here. Okay, so each of these sections links to a section of your worksheet. They are clearly labelled with 1, 2, 3 and 4. Your worksheet, or if you're doing it on paper, you look at the worksheet on screen. It says section 1, 2, 3, 4, for example. Section 1 is location. Section 2 is why the scheme needed. So therefore there's a little bit of text around that, and we'll talk about that very shortly. But we're going to look at 2 aspects of location. Okay. If I can actually get my slide to change side, there we go. So you should have or see a map here. Now the first thing I want you to do is open up Google Maps. You don't need to type in Chambamontera to start with. If you actually type in Peru, obviously that's where we find Chambamontera. If you type in Peru, you'll be able to label this ocean and these countries around here. You can have an understanding of where the Andes Mountains is, and you could add Lima, but you're unlikely to be able to find Chambamontera on the map. So basically that's the first task. The second task is then to actually go into Google Maps, then type in Chambamontera, and then zoom in or go to Street View on the town. And in this instance, what I want to know in the box is for you to describe what it is actually like in Chambamontera. And I'll give you a little bit of feedback on that very, very shortly. Right, so the first thing is you should have, see where my pen's gone, there it is, this is Lima. All right, so Lima is the capital city. Okay, and what we've now got here is you should have labeled this as the Pacific Ocean. What you've got here, I'm going to just do abbreviations of these. You've got Ecuador, Colombia, Brazil is actually there, Bolivia is this one down here. Okay, and come back to that in a second. There we go. And then this country here is Peru. And the Andes Mountains effectively runs from here all the way down the mountain there, and all of that is mountain ranges, and that means that is, you know, some of the highest, most dangerous mountains in the world. It's caused by a destructive plate margin of the South American plate and the Pacific plate, and Chambamontera is somewhere in the north up here. Okay, so as you can imagine, it's quite a remote mountain town. Now if you'd looked at the street view, you might have seen a picture that looks something like this, and you know, we would ask you to describe what the location is like. Well, the first thing, if you're using an adjective, clearly you've got a mountainous location, you know, and it's rugged and it is remote. Okay, now if you then look at these types of houses, you know, housing is very basic. It lacks clearly any regulation. Okay, so it's almost like the people have built these houses by themselves with materials. They don't look alike. People build them to the size they can afford. Another idea is that this area is very quite poorly developed. You've got rugged roads with no tarmac. Okay, and obviously these are quite dangerous in the winter when it snows and there's ice and there's rain and all sorts of things on them as well. But these mountains here are pretty rugged. Okay, you've got, you know, sparse vegetation. You've got 1 or 2 trees, but not a great deal. This one here is probably actually a coffee tree, I would have thought, where it grows coffee beans. So you know, it's going to be hard. Life is going to be very, very difficult in this area. Okay, so we're going to move on to section 2. Okay, so if you want to replay the video, that's fine, but ultimately there's a little piece of text there. There's a little passage about Chambamontera, and these are just little basic comprehension tasks that you would find in your exam. And what we're looking at here is these 3 things. There is a shine task there. Okay, the key element of this is that Chambamontera is not in the same level of development as those people that live in Lima. I mean, Peru is not a very developed country as it is, but areas like Chambamontera are even less developed. Okay, there's a massive division within the country. So what I'd like you to do is have a quick go at those 3 comprehension questions. I'm going to pause the video. Right, so just scribbled a few answers down for you. Explaining why farming is difficult. Well, basically, the climate and the soil is poor. Crops don't grow so well, and it's limited to the types of crops they can grow. So they're not going to make a lot of money there. They have to be subsistence, which means they basically eat what they grow and they sell the rest. We'll come to that in a little while. Why is energy so short? Well, the government will not provide it. It's so remote. There's only about 400 people live in Chambamontera, and they feel it is not economically viable to put electricity up there because it will need maintenance, it will need repairs, etc. And it's just not cost effective. So they just let them sort themselves out. The level of development in Chambamontera is going to be much lower due to the location of the town. Okay, it's we're talking about a lack of resources up there. We're talking about energy, communication, manufacturing is going to be poor. They are literally going to be farmers for the most part, and therefore their income is going to be lower, education is going to be lower, life expectancy is probably going to be lower as well, and their access to clean water is probably pretty good actually because of the river, but their access to food and nutrition is going to be much more difficult. Right, so in section 3, you just basically need to have an outline of what the microhydro scheme is. And there are 2 ways of looking at this. Number 1 is obviously you look at the actual physical operation of the scheme, which you can see here in this diagram, and I'll come to that in a minute. And the second part of it is this bit here, where it actually tells you how much it costs. So you've got the overall cost of 51,000, and the fact that each person or family gave $750 towards the scheme. And this was provided in low cost loans because obviously $750 is actually the income for a family for a year. So they can't afford that in one go, but they just pay a little bit off every single time. Right, so looking back at the video again, if you go back, you'll see roughly how it runs. But in terms of this, the key element of this are the mountains, okay? And what the mountains provide is lots of water, okay, with snow melt, ice melt and rainfall. And more importantly, they provide it with potential energy. So therefore the water flowing down the mountainside here has got lots and lots and lots of energy. And what they'll do is they'll trap some of the water, was constantly flowing. So because the constant supply makes it sustainable. It's never going to go away. There's always going to be rainfall up there. There's always going to be snow and ice, and they don't need a great deal because what they'll do is they have a channel which traps some of the water, and it runs it off into this storage tank here. Okay, so it comes all the way down to the storage tank, and when they want energy, what they can then do is they can just drop it into the generator down here, and that spins a turbine. So basically, you've got your turbine like that, and the water passing through spins the turbine round, and then that turbine goes to a big generator. Oh, my diagram's terrible. And that spins a generator, and the coils in the generator therefore create electricity. Now the idea of this is that if they, for example, in the winter when it's darker, they need more street lighting and more lighting in the homes, they need more electricity. So what they can do is they can actually drop more water in. They can turn the voltage up, they can generate more energy for the people in the houses. In the summer, where they don't need as much energy, they just reduce the amount of energy they need. The important point here is that there's a slip-off slope, there's a runoff point here. So if this 4-bay tank gets too full, they don't have to keep generating electricity, they can actually just release the water back down the mountainside and it rejoins the river further downstream. And obviously that is outside the boundary of the village because you don't want to be releasing water back into the village again. Okay, so I'm just going to put a couple of little houses in here for you just to show there. And what they have then got is they've got wires coming into the houses. Right, that's the end of this video. The next one will explain the section 4, and then it will also explain the exam question 2. Okay, thank you.